I went back and forth on whether or not to actually make this video. On the one hand, and most importantly, this could be an invaluable source of information for young trans people in the UK looking to go on HRT, or who might already be on the waiting list for HRT and are wondering what to expect. And also for the friends, family members, and general allies of trans people, again, especially in the UK. This is a video about how the waiting list for HRT works, what to expect when you go into HRT, and what it's like going private, which is an unfortunate reality for a lot of trans people in the UK right now. On the other hand, the comments section. There's going to be a lot of lonely and friendless people who don't have a community of their own, who are already typing away furiously in the comments. And I'm not sure how up for that I am, so I turned to my wonderful, wonderful patrons and asked them if I should make this video or not, and overwhelmingly, they said yes, while also suggesting I turn off the comments, which I've never ever done for a video. Maybe I will this time. Let's see how it goes. If you happen to be watching this and I have turned off the comments, then you know what kind of hate and abuse I got for this. So, like I said, this is a video about going on HRT. Now, I really strongly recommend you go watch Abigail Thorne's video on what it's like going on HRT on the NHS. I'm sure you already know what Philosophy Tube is, but in case you don't, go watch her video on it. It is a feature-length documentary-style video about being on the waiting list as a trans person in the UK and fighting to go on HRT via the NHS. That waiting list is at least 5 years long. It depends on who you ask. I recently changed GPs, but my previous GP was a really lovely, kind, honest, and supportive guy. And I approached him about going on HRT and physically transitioning at least a year ago. When I approached him, he immediately said, yeah, cool, that's fine, that's great, but the waiting list is long. He said it could be 5 years. Other medical professionals say 10 years. If you search around online, it goes up to 19 years, depending on who you talk to. Whichever way you look, it's a long time to be sitting in a body that you don't like and waiting for help. So I sat on that waiting list, and in the meantime, I went private. Going private for healthcare in the UK is not a normal thing. We have a free healthcare system. It's being slowly destroyed and dismantled by our current government, but that's a whole different subject for a different video, and other people smarter than me can talk about that. So this is what I did when I decided to go private for trans healthcare in the UK. First thing I did was actually not contact anyone. I decided to go get laser hair removal, which is a thing you have to pay for no matter what. So at this point, I've had 9 or 10 laser hair removal sessions on my face. My facial hair is almost completely gone at this point. There's barely anything left, and that's great. But it is very expensive. It has cost me hundreds upon hundreds of pounds to get this far, and it's taken a year. And it's painful, but it was the first step. It was necessary for me, and I feel great. When I wake up in the morning and my face feels completely soft and clean and clear, it is absolute euphoria, so that's worth it. But definitely shop around when you're looking to get laser hair removal. I went to an independent clinic. I will not name it, but they charged me an extortionate amount of money for 6 sessions. I then moved to London and I went to a chain, and this chain charged me 1/6 the amount of money I had paid for 6 sessions. I'm not joking. 1/6 of the amount for the exact same treatment with the exact same results. So shop around. The next thing I did, which is the big thing, is contact the people who will eventually give you hormones. For me, that was the GHC, the Gender Hormone Clinic. They used to have a different name. I can't remember it now. I've adapted to the new name and I've forgotten what it was. But the Gender Hormone Clinic is the big private trans healthcare clinic in London, in England. So I contacted them. First thing they said was, you need a psychological diagnosis of gender dysphoria. They give you a list of psychologists, again, all private, all with certificates in dealing with exactly this thing. You pick one, they're all about the same price, and off you go. So then I contacted one of those psychologists. I was put on a short waiting list. A few weeks go by, and I get my assessment. This is a one-on-one, hour-long Zoom therapy session. Well, not therapy, it's diagnosis. You talk to a psychologist for an hour over Zoom. You tell them A lot of really personal, private information about your childhood, about your current mental state, about your past, about how you're feeling, and they listen. And they diagnose you with gender dysphoria if they believe that you have it. For me, I was sure that they would give me the diagnosis because I know what I feel, I know my brain, I know my body. What was surprising is that there was more dysphoria than I recognized and anticipated. I said that my dysphoria goes back a few years. I remember first feeling uncomfortable in my body, kind of in my mid-20s. I'm 33 now. And then we dug into my childhood. And she said, no, your dysphoria goes back a long, long time. And we picked apart specific moments, and it was difficult, but it was obvious by the end that my dysphoria has been around since I was a little kid. I wasn't trying on my mum's clothes, but that's a stereotype. So that was interesting. And it also cost, I think, £500, which again is a lot of money. They give you a certificate and you pass that certificate on to the gender hormone clinic. Then you have another Zoom interview session with a member of the gender hormone clinic. That costs about £200. And in that, they determine whether or not you are eligible. And I can't remember the details of that now. I think it was basically to do with your medical history, your mental and physical health. So they go into your history of things like anxiety and depression, and then family history of specific things that hormones could possibly affect negatively. One example of this that I think I should talk about right now is cancer. I have health anxiety. I'm very afraid of cancer. And the reason that they bring it up is because of the BRCA gene. If you don't know what that is, the BRCA gene is a gene that is passed down through families that increases your likelihood of getting a feminine-specific cancer. Ovarian cancer, breast cancer, and cervical cancer. Something that a lot of people don't know is that if you are trans femme like me, when you start hormones and you start developing breast tissue, your chances of developing breast cancer fall exactly in line with those of a cisgender woman. So they need to know if you have the BRCA gene or if you think you might have it. I'm not sure because my grandmother had ovarian cancer. Her daughter, my aunt, goes for regular checks. I'm going to go on the NHS and find out if I have the BRCA gene. If you do, it means that you have to get regular breast examinations from the age of 40 rather than 50. That's it, really. Unless you have BRCA gene type 2, I think it is, which is what Angelina Jolie has, and you get a double mastectomy, like immediately if you have that, which is just something worth knowing. So that's what that meeting over Zoom is for, just to check that you are physically fit enough and eligible for HRT in a medical sense. Then they put you on a short waiting list that might be a few months long. I can't remember how long it was for me, 3, 4, 5 months. And eventually you get your in-person meeting. Your in-person meeting, for me, was with the same person who I spoke to over Zoom. And she was absolutely brilliant, lovely, brilliant, kind, fantastic person. You have an hour-long face-to-face meeting that goes over a lot of the same stuff, but this meeting doesn't cost any extra. And then they prescribe you your hormones. Going private for HRT took me 7 or 8 months of diagnoses, meetings with a psychologist, meetings with a gender specialist at the hormone clinic, and eventually a physical in-person meeting that led to HRT. So even going private, you don't just get the hormones immediately. There is still a process, and that process costs about £700. And it took me, as I said, at least 6 months, maybe 8 months. And now I have my hormones. Right now I am on estrogen. That's the first thing they do. They give you estrogen. And then later down the line, about a year down the line, they introduce testosterone blockers if necessary. Statistically, about 1/3 of trans women actually don't need testosterone blockers because estrogen works to reduce the amount of testosterone in your body by itself. But 2/3 of trans women, so the majority, do need T blockers. I'll find out if I do about 6 months from now when I get another blood test, which is something I forgot to mention. In the lead up to my first consultation with the gender hormone clinic after my psychological evaluation, I had to get blood tests done via the NHS, so it was free. I contacted my GP and I got a blood test done. These blood tests are extensive. I mean, it's still one blood test. They just take a vial of your blood. But there's a huge list of things that they look for, absolutely massive. The main thing they're looking for is your hormone levels, your estrogen and testosterone levels, which are different for everyone. But they're also looking for things like your blood sugars, your cholesterol, blah, blah, blah. Mine was all fine, mine was all normal. As a side effect, I found out that I am very, very, very low risk of developing type 2 diabetes, so that's nice to know. And I also found out that my testosterone levels, when I took the blood test, are the absolute lowest that someone assigned male at birth can have, and my estrogen was almost double the maximum amount that someone assigned male at birth can have. I have an enormous amount of estrogen naturally in my body, which is really, really cool. I can't remember the unit of measurement, but a cis woman typically has between 1 and 200 of these units, and I have 86 without HRT, so that's a lot. I already have an enormous amount of estrogen and a very low level of testosterone. I don't know what that means, but my partner spends a lot of time on Reddit, and apparently this is a really common thing for trans women. We already feel femme because we're already full of estrogen. At least that's the case for some of us, myself included. And I think that studies should be done into that, the hormone levels of people who later come out as trans, because mine was certainly not the average. So that's everything leading up to HRT if you go private. You're looking at spending about £700 in the lead up, psychological evaluation, blood tests, medical examination, in-person meeting, and then you're given your hormones. During that in-person meeting, you are given 3 choices when it comes to how you want to take your hormones: pills, gel, and patches. Patches are supposed to be the most effective. It's like a nicotine patch, you stick it on your skin, and the estrogen slowly seeps into you. But it's not a good idea if you're someone with sweaty and oily skin, and it is no secret that I sweat like a bitch. I am very sweaty. So patches were just not going to work for me because they just slip off. Pills are very, very common, but they actually have a particular and unique risk. You may already have heard this, that going on HRT as a trans femme person raises your likelihood of developing a blood clot, especially later in life, by 1.3 to 3 times, which is scary. And that is escalated even further if you smoke. Smokers are far more likely to develop blood clots, and so you combine the two, real bad idea. But I found out during this meeting that that's only true if you take the pills. The way that the pills interact with your liver and your kidneys, again, I don't know anything about biology, so this is what I understand, this is what I was told by people who actually know. It causes blood clots, or it can. So the pills are the most dangerous because they're the thing that might cause a blood clot to happen later in life. So I went for the gel. The gel doesn't cause blood clots and it doesn't slide off you. The gel is also very, very common. I have 1 milligram of estradiol in gel form that I use once a day. I've only done 4 so far at the time of recording this video, so I'm still very new to the whole thing. They're little sachets of gel, you squeeze it out, and it's this goopy alcohol-based substance, and you rub it onto your thighs. That's it. It dries within 10 minutes, and I do it while I'm watching a film. You're supposed to put it on morning or night, and I was advised that you can split it, put half on in the morning, half at night, which helps regulate your emotional levels, but I went all in, and I do it at night. That's it. That's the process. And I should mention that this costs me £50 a month. That price will go up if I go on T blockers. You can avoid T blockers if you decide to have surgery. I don't know if I will ever get a vaginoplasty. I, at this point, have absolutely no idea. But one surgery that I am very, very tempted to get, probably a few years down the line, when I'm sure that this is what I want and I'm sure that this is my life now, is an orchiectomy, which is the removal of the testicles, which would stop me having to take testosterone blockers. If I get any surgery at all, that'll be it. I know that I would like that. But there's always a chance. People don't talk about this enough, I don't think. There's always a chance that I decide this isn't right for me. 6 months down the line, a year down the line, and I decide, no, I'm not doing this anymore. I talked to my partner about this, and I came to realize that if I ever stopped taking hormones, if I didn't like it for whatever reason, I would not socially detransition. I still feel like myself in my heart of hearts. I love everything that I am. As a trans woman, I am so proud of myself, and I love myself more than I ever could have before. And there's every chance that probably for medical reasons I might stop, but I would never detransition. I can't imagine that in my future. Not in a social or personal way. Maybe in a medical way if it were necessary. And I think that's just something that people don't talk about enough. Detransitioning means a lot of different things, and I can't imagine ever doing it fully. Medically, maybe. Coming off hormones, maybe. You never know. I've only just started, and I love it. And I should mention that the effects are immediate in some ways. Emotionally, most of all. My emotions have changed slightly since the moment I started taking hormones. And I read about this. This is very, very normal. I noticed immediately that I was more susceptible to getting upset. I feel my feelings in a much more raw sense now. I described it to a friend of mine as like removing cataracts. I can see more clearly now. Colors and light feel more invasive in an emotional sense. I went for a run the other morning and I started crying while jogging, listening to a Bring Me the Horizon song. I feel all of my feelings way more intensely, and I'm far more likely to suddenly cry. That's an emotional shift that I really, really enjoy, and it happened immediately, like within hours. I put on my first bit of gel at 9 p.m. I woke up the next morning, and I already felt different. The physical changes are much, much slower. The development of breast tissue takes at least 3 months, usually 6, and it might not happen at all. The shifting of body fat into more feminine places to create a more hourglass or pear-shaped figure, that also happens gradually, and I'm really looking forward to that. And then there's things like your skin gets softer, your body hair reduces, and your hair gets softer and shinier and thicker and fuller and blah blah blah. If you suffer from male pattern baldness, which I don't. I am in no danger of that ever happening because there's no baldness anywhere in my genes on either side of my family. That baldness progression slows down and can be reversed with hormones, but I don't know. I can't really speak to that. I have a lot of hair. Okay, I think that's everything. I've talked for a long time, and what I really wanted to do here was just talk about what it's like going private. The NHS has failed trans people, but I don't blame the NHS. I blame the government. I love the NHS. And I will always fight for it. It's a beautiful, wonderful, miraculous, incredible thing that was created by a Welsh communist. But right now it's not serving us. And so I went private. £50 a month is a lot of money for hormones. That's why I'm very grateful that I have a Patreon. My patrons helped pay for my laser hair removal. I couldn't have done it without them. And they encouraged me to make this video, so I really hope it's been helpful to any young trans people, any trans people on the NHS waiting list, or the families of trans people who want to know what happens exactly. I hope I've given a bit of information. I have told everything I possibly can about my transition socially and chemically over the past year. This is everything I know. I hope you've enjoyed. I usually talk about books in case you don't know, so subscribe for books and support me on Patreon if you really, really like what I've done here.